I was 31 when my husband told me he didn't love me anymore. The words didn't come out cruelly, not even angrily. He said them like a fact. Like the way you'd say the sky is blue or the rent is due on the first. He sat on the edge of our bed, elbows on his knees, eyes somewhere near the floor, and said, "I think we're done." It was so quiet that I heard the faint click of the ceiling fan's chain swaying above us. The stillness was what hurt the most, like the air itself didn't know how to move around something like that. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 10. We met in Chicago when I was 21 and he was 24. I worked at a coffee shop near campus. He was doing his master in architecture. I thought he was brilliant, kind, stable. He had that calmness that made me believe he'd never hurt me, a soft-spoken way of listening, as if everything I said mattered. And maybe, at the beginning, it did. We built a life that looked solid on paper. An apartment with big windows. Friends we hosted dinner parties with. Trips once a year, Paris, Lisbon, somewhere we could post photos of and say, finally taking time for ourselves. We even had a shared Spotify playlist titled Sundays, full of lazy songs for mornings when we cooked pancakes and pretended we were the kind of couple who'd never drift. But the drifting happened slowly, the way water erodes stone, gradual, invisible, until one day there's a canyon between you. He started staying later at work. I told myself it was normal, architecture deadlines, long projects. I started going out with coworkers more often, lingering over drinks I didn't even like because being home alone felt heavier than the noise of a crowded bar. When I found out he was seeing someone, it wasn't even through him. It was her. She messaged me, said she didn't know he was married until she'd already fallen for him. She sent screenshots of texts, his words, his stupid phrases I knew by heart. "You make me feel alive again." Alive, like I was death. I remember sitting on our couch, phone in hand, staring at that message thread while the hum of the fridge filled the silence. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat there, rereading those words until they blurred. When he came home that night, I didn't even ask him to explain. I just looked at him and said, "How long?" He sighed, ran a hand through his hair. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies tucked neatly into our shared calendar, right beside grocery lists and dinner plans. He moved out 3 days later, took the essentials, clothes, his laptop, the books he said actually mattered. The rest he promised to come back for later. He never did. For a long time, I thought that was the end of the story. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the slow process of learning how to breathe again. But I've realized something about endings. They don't happen where you think they do. Sometimes the end is a year later, when you meet someone new and realize you flinch when they reach for your hand. Sometimes it's when you wake up one morning and realize you've stopped checking your phone to see if your ex has texted. Or sometimes it's when you find yourself falling into the same patterns that once broke you. A year after the divorce, I met Daniel. He was 40, a photographer, sharp and gentle in that disarming combination that made people trust him too easily. We met at a friend's rooftop birthday. I was wearing a red dress I almost didn't have the confidence to put on, and he said, "You look like you belong in a painting." I rolled my eyes, but I smiled. It wasn't instant love. It was a slow, careful, unraveling text messages that started as banter, turned into late-night conversations, and then into weekends spent in each other's apartments, wrapped in that new love haze that makes you forget who you used to be. I told him everything about my ex, the affair, the divorce, the hollow parts I was still patching up. He listened, said, "You didn't deserve that." But here's the thing, we never really stop wanting to be chosen, to be the exception. Daniel was separated, not divorced. "It's complicated," he'd said when I asked. "We're basically done." I believed him because I wanted to. Because I wanted to believe that maybe this time, I'd get the happy ending I was owed. When I found out he was still living with his wife, it wasn't through him either. It was through an Instagram story, her birthday dinner. The same plate, the same candles, the same bottle of wine I'd seen on his kitchen counter days earlier. I stared at that picture for what felt like hours, my stomach tightening with that sick, familiar ache. I didn't confront him right away. I waited, collected proof. Let the quiet fester until it filled the room when he came over. When I finally told him I knew, he didn't deny it, didn't even apologize right away. He just looked tired. "It's not what you think," he said. It always is. That night after he left, I sat by the window and thought about how I had become part of someone else's story. The other woman, the betrayal. The circle had closed. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything in my mind, every choice, every red flag I'd painted over with hope. I thought about my ex-husband's words, "I think we're done," and wondered if love always ends the same way, in exhaustion. But slowly, something inside me shifted. Not healed exactly, just softened. I stopped looking for closure in other people's apologies. I stopped trying to fix what someone else broke. I learned that sometimes survival isn't about moving on. It's about staying with yourself long enough to remember you're still there. It's been 2 years now. My apartment is smaller, quieter. I drink my coffee by the window and let the light spill over the same spot where I once cried. Every now and then, I see my ex-husband's name pop up online. He's remarried. She looks kind. I hope she is. And Daniel, he moved to another city. Sometimes he texts, usually when he's drunk. I don't answer. Not out of bitterness, but because I finally understand something. Not every story needs a sequel. Some love stories end, not with betrayal or rage, but with a sigh, the kind that means you're tired, but you're finally free. It's strange how silence becomes its own kind of companion. After Daniel, I didn't want anyone around. The idea of another first date made me feel physically ill. The small talk, the pretending, the fragile hope that maybe this one would be different. I deleted every dating app. I told my friends to stop setting me up. I didn't need another man to heal me. I needed to understand why I kept breaking in the same places. I started running again, not because I liked it, but because it gave my anxiety somewhere to go. Every morning before sunrise, I'd lace up my shoes and run along the lakefront, headphones in, cold air burning my lungs. I wasn't running toward anything. I was running away from the ghosts that lived in my apartment, his laugh, his toothbrush still in the drawer, the echo of "it's not what you think." Therapy helped, eventually. My therapist, Mara, was this soft-spoken woman who had the unnerving habit of letting silence stretch until I filled it. "Why do you think you stayed with Daniel?" she asked once. I remember staring at the carpet, picking at a loose thread on my sleeve. "Because he made me feel seen," I said. "Because I thought if I could fix him, it meant I was worth keeping." She smiled, not kindly, but knowingly. "You're trying to earn love that should be freely given." It hit me in a way that almost felt insulting, because it was too simple and too true. I spent the next few months learning how to be alone without being lonely. It sounds cliché, but it was excruciating. You don't realize how much of yourself you've outsourced to other people until you're forced to sit with what's left. There were nights when I ate cereal for dinner and scrolled mindlessly through social media, seeing pictures of happy couples, engagements, bobbies, all those milestones I thought I'd have by now. My mom called one night and said, "You should visit, the house feels empty." I hadn't been back to my hometown in years. I said yes. Back there, everything looked smaller. The streets, the park where I'd had my first kiss, even the sky. I found my old journals in my childhood bedroom, entries from when I was 16, writing about how I'd marry someone who made me feel safe but wild. I laughed out loud reading that, because I couldn't even remember the last time I felt wild. My mom had this way of seeing through me. One morning over coffee, she said, "You've always tried to carry people, even when they don't want to be carried." I wanted to argue, but she was right. I'd built my entire identity around being needed, the good girlfriend, the understanding wife, the one who forgives. That realization hurt more than any breakup. Because what if the problem wasn't just the people I loved, but the way I loved them? When I got back to Chicago, I didn't rush back to normal. I stayed quiet, worked, read, took long walks with no destination. I started journaling again, but this time not about men, about myself. About what I wanted, not what I feared losing. Months passed. One afternoon, I was at a bookstore, thumbing through a photography book, when I heard a voice say my name. It was Daniel. He looked different, a little thinner, hair longer, the same kind eyes that once felt like home. For a moment, the world tilted. He smiled nervously. "Hey, it's been a while." I could feel my pulse in my throat. I wanted to say something cool or detached, but all that came out was, "Yeah, it has." We stood there, surrounded by shelves of stories, two people who'd written a painful one together. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee, and against my better judgment, I said yes. It wasn't romantic. It was strange, like visiting an old house you used to live in, seeing the wallpaper peeling and realizing you once thought it was beautiful. He told me he and his wife finally divorced, said he was sorry for everything. He looked sincere, but I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. When he asked if I'd ever thought about us, I said no, and for the first time it was true. That night, I walked home under the city lights, and it hit me, closure doesn't come when someone apologizes. It comes when you stop needing them to. After that, my life didn't magically transform. It got better in quiet, unremarkable ways. I redecorated my apartment, bought plants I managed to keep alive, started taking photos of little things, sunlight on the kitchen counter, the reflection of the moon in a puddle. I wasn't documenting pain anymore. I was documenting proof that I was still here. Then, one evening at a gallery opening, I met someone new. His name was Alex. He was a writer, the kind who noticed small details, like how I stirred my drink clockwise or how I tilted my head when I laughed. We talked for hours that night, about art, books, the weird ache of trying to grow up without hardening. I didn't feel sparks, not the dizzying kind. I felt warmth. Familiar, steady, real. When he asked for my number, I hesitated. Part of me still feared the cycle, the rush, the ruin, the recovery. But another part whispered, maybe not everyone will hurt you the same way. We started slow. Coffee dates, walks, long text exchanges about the most random things. He never made me guess where I stood. No games, no confusion, just quiet honesty. For months, I kept waiting for the catch, the lie, the inconsistency, the moment I'd feel small again. It never came. One night, we were lying on his couch, his hand tracing lazy circles on my arm, and he said, "You always look like you're waiting for the floor to fall out from under you." I laughed, a little embarrassed. Old habit. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "You don't have to keep bracing for impact. Not everyone's here to break you." It was such a simple sentence, but it cracked something open in me. I realized I'd been living like heartbreak was inevitable, like every good thing was a countdown to loss. With Alex, love didn't feel like a test I had to pass. It felt like breathing. That's not to say everything was perfect. I still had nights when anxiety clawed its way up my throat. Times I'd pull away out of reflex, waiting for the hurt that never came. But he stayed, not to fix me, just to sit beside me until I remembered how to stay, too. It's been 2 years now. We live together in a tiny apartment that smells like coffee and lavender. I still run in the mornings, but not to escape anymore, just to watch the city wake up. Sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the window, I barely recognize the woman staring back. She's softer, maybe, but stronger too. I think about the version of me who thought love had to hurt to be real, who mistook chaos for connection, who kept trying to prove she was worth keeping. I want to tell her she was never hard to love. She was just loving people who didn't know how to stay. And maybe that's what growing up really is, realizing that healing doesn't mean you never get hurt again. It means you trust yourself enough to know you'll survive it. Peace has this weird way of feeling temporary when you've lived most of your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. For a while, I convinced myself that things with Alex were too easy, too good, too calm, like I had stumbled into someone else's life by mistake. There was no chaos, no guessing games, no waiting for unanswered texts that made my stomach twist. We had a rhythm. Slow mornings, lazy Sundays, small arguments about nothing that we always managed to talk through. But under it all, I carried this quiet unease, a hum I couldn't silence. Not because of anything he did, but because I didn't know how to exist without bracing for pain. Then one afternoon, it happened. I was at work, a late shift, nothing special. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me pick up. "Hey," the voice said. "It's Daniel." It was like hearing an old song you'd sworn you'd deleted. My chest went tight. I hadn't heard his voice in almost 3 years. He said he'd found something of mine, an old photo album from when we lived together. He wanted to drop it off. I told him to just throw it away, but he insisted. Said he'd be in the neighborhood anyway. I could have said no, should have said no. But part of me, that restless, unresolved part, wanted to see him. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of something darker. He came by the next day. Same brown eyes, same disarming smile, just older. Time had softened him, but there was still that familiar energy, that pull I used to mistake for destiny. We talked for a while, awkward at first, then easy. Too easy, the kind of easy that felt dangerous. He said he'd been in therapy, said he finally understood the damage he'd done, that he wished he could go back and be the man I deserved. I didn't say much, I just listened. But when he looked at me, really looked, I felt something shift inside me. Not love, not longing, just recognition. Of who I used to be, of how much I'd changed. Before he left, he said, "You seem happy." "I am," I said, and for once I meant it. But that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying our conversation, his tone, his eyes, the ghost of a life that almost was. I hated that a part of me still reacted, that some tiny, buried piece of me still wanted closure that I already had. The next morning, Alex noticed. "You okay?" he asked, pouring coffee. I hesitated. I could have lied. I could have said I was fine and buried it. But something about the way he looked at me, steady, open, made me tell the truth. "Daniel called," I said. "He stopped by." Alex didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly. How did that feel? It was such a simple question, but it cut right through me. "Strange," I said. "Not in a good way, just strange." He came over and set down his mug. "Do you want to talk about it?" So I did, every messy detail, and he just listened. No jealousy, no accusations, no trying to one-up the past. When I was done, he said, "I'm glad you told me. You don't owe me perfection, just honesty." That sentence sat in my chest for days. I realized that was the difference. Daniel made me feel like I had to hide my mess. Alex made room for it. Still, the visit stirred something I couldn't shake. Not about Daniel, but about me. If I was so happy, why did the past still have claws? Why did my brain still reach backward when everything good was right in front of me? I brought it up in therapy. Mara smiled that patient smile and said, "Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning how to live beside it." That helped, a little. A few weeks later, Alex's company offered him a job in Portland, a big step up, more money, a chance to build something. He wanted to go, but it meant leaving Chicago, leaving us. When he told me, my first instinct was panic. The old reflex, brace for loss, expect abandonment. "I don't want you to resent me," I said. He reached for my hand. "I won't, but I need to do this." I nodded, pretending to be okay. But that night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if love could really survive distance. Not the physical kind, but the emotional one that comes from growing in different directions. He left 2 months later. We promised to visit, to call, to try, and we did at first. Video calls, texts, care packages, but slowly, inevitably, things changed. The silences between messages grew longer. The warmth dimmed. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just life, time, distance, the slow, quiet erosion that happens when love stretches too far. One night, he called. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "I think we're both pretending this still feels the same," he said gently. My throat tightened. I know. We didn't fight, we didn't cry, we just let go. After we hung up, I sat in my dark apartment and felt that familiar ache, but it wasn't devastation. It was acceptance. Because this time I wasn't losing myself with him. The next morning, I made coffee, watched the city wake, and realized something profound. Every person I'd loved had taught me something different. Daniel taught me what love is. Alex taught me what love can be, but being alone again taught me that my story doesn't end when someone leaves. And maybe that's the real kind of peace, not the kind that means nothing hurts, but the kind that lets you keep living even when it does. Months passed, seasons changed. One afternoon, I was walking by the lake, the same path I used to run when I was trying to escape myself, and I saw a couple laughing together. It made me smile, not with envy, but with recognition. Because for the first time, I didn't ache for a love like theirs. I was content building one with myself. And maybe that's all any of us are trying to do, to stop mistaking survival for strength, and to finally learn that healing isn't a destination. It's a way of existing. It's strange how life feels circular. Like no matter how far you go, you eventually find yourself standing in some version of an old moment, older, softer, wiser, but still somehow the same person underneath. It's been almost 5 years since Alex and I said goodbye. That sentence used to sting. Now it just feels like something that happened, a chapter that ended when it was supposed to. After him, I didn't date for a long time. Not out of bitterness or fear, but because I finally wanted to know who I was when no one else's eyes were on me. I spent that time quietly, work, friends, therapy, solitude. I traveled a little, learned to cook more than the same 3 meals, picked up pottery, started running again. I realized how much of my 20s I'd spent performing, trying to be lovable, desirable, worth keeping. Every relationship had felt like an audition. With Daniel, it was for approval. With Alex, it was for safety. With both, I was still waiting for someone to tell me I was enough. Now, in my 30s, I know that no one can hand you that certainty. You build it slowly, like muscle memory, through loneliness, through grief, through learning to hold your own hand. About a year ago, I did something I never thought I would. I posted my story online. Not everything, of course, just the bones of it. The betrayal, the healing, the strange comfort of finding yourself after being lost in someone else. It went viral. Thousands of comments. Some angry, some kind, most heartbreakingly familiar. People saying, "This is my story too," or, "I thought I was the only one who felt this." I spent hours reading them, crying, laughing, feeling this collective hum of shared survival. That's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak. It's communal. Everyone thinks their pain is unique until they talk about it. Then you realize how many people are quietly walking around carrying the same cracked pieces, pretending they're fine. Since then, I've written more not for likes or validation, but because it feels like exhaling. Like telling the universe I made it through. I'm still here. Last winter, I got an email from Alex, out of nowhere. He said he'd read something I wrote. He said it made him proud, that he hoped I was happy. He'd moved back to Chicago, apparently, married now, expecting a baby. Reading that didn't hurt. It felt gentle, like closing a door that had been left slightly open for too long. I replied, congratulated him, wished him well, told him that I truly was happy. And I meant it, because I am. There's a man I've been seeing for a few months now, someone quiet, thoughtful, patient. The kind who listens more than he talks. He doesn't try to fix me, and I don't try to prove myself. We just exist. Sometimes we sit in silence for hours, reading or cooking or doing nothing at all. It's not the dizzying, breathless love I used to crave. It's slower, softer, real. The kind of love that feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. But even if it doesn't last, even if it ends tomorrow, I know I'll be okay. That's not something I could have said before. I used to think the end of a relationship was the end of me. Now I know it's just the end of a version of myself that no longer fits. When I walk by the lake these days, I see reflections everywhere of the woman I was, the one who begged for scraps, who thought heartbreak made her unworthy. I don't hate her anymore. I just wish I could tell her that everything she feared losing wasn't worth keeping in the first place. Sometimes, when the sky turns that soft orange before sunset, I imagine all the people who have loved and lost standing at the water's edge, invisible, but connected. All of us waiting for the moment we realize that peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means forgiving them and yourself. And maybe that's why I'm writing this. Not to relive the pain, but to remind whoever reads it that love isn't supposed to destroy you. It's supposed to grow you. And sometimes, the most profound love story you'll ever live is the one where you finally choose yourself. If I could go back to that night, the one where I stood in the rain outside Daniel's apartment, or the one where I cried on Alex's floor, or the one where I thought I'd never recover, I'd whisper this. You will. You'll survive every heartbreak you think you can't. And one day, you'll wake up, make coffee, and realize you don't ache anymore. You'll look in the mirror and see someone whole, not because someone else stayed, but because you did. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything.